Imagine a man whose name carried weight in the courts of heaven. Not a king, not a conqueror, not a man of armies or gold, but a man of reverence. His land stretched far and wide across the plains of Uz, where the dawn rolled over fields like waves of light, and the bleating of sheep rose with the morning wind. His herds were countless, his servants loyal, his household full of laughter and song. But what truly set him apart was not his wealth, nor his wisdom, nor the walls of his estate. It was his heart, a heart tuned to heaven, a soul that bent low in humility even when the world bowed before him. His name was Job, a man blameless and upright, who feared God and shunned evil. In an age where pride walked boldly and sin wore crowns, Job chose the narrow road, the quiet obedience that pleases the unseen king. When others feasted, he fasted. When others cursed, he blessed. When others built monuments to themselves, he built altars to the Almighty. Each morning began not with the noise of command, but with the sound of prayer. As the first light touched the horizon, Job would rise, lift his eyes toward the heavens, and whisper words that only God and angels could hear. He prayed not only for himself, but for his children, for their laughter, their hearts, their hidden thoughts. And when evening fell and the stars gathered like sentinels above his home, gratitude flowed from his lips as incense before the throne. Every breath he took seemed to echo devotion. The soil beneath his feet knew the weight of worship. Even his silence carried the fragrance of reverence. He was the kind of man heaven could point to and say, There is one who walks rightly before me. But the heavens, though full of light, are not silent halls. Beyond the veil of sight, where mysteries dwell and destinies are spoken, conversations stir that mortals cannot hear. In that realm, radiant and terrible, celestial beings gather before the throne, the sons of God, as ancient scripture names them. And among them, uninvited yet permitted, came another presence, a shadow that had once known the warmth of divine fire. He moved through the assembly like smoke in sunlight, a whisper among voices, a serpent among seraphs. His name was once glorious, but now it is a scar upon eternity, the accuser. He stood before the throne, his voice smooth, his tone mocking. Does Job fear God for nothing? The question hung in the air like poison. Have you not blessed him on every side? His hands prosper in all he touches. His home is full, his name honored, his paths covered in light. Take it all away, and you will see what he truly is. Strip him of his comfort, strike him with loss, and he will curse you to your face. The heavens grew still. The cherubim ceased their song. Even the winds that circle the throne seemed to pause. The question was not about Job alone. It was about the nature of love itself. Is faith real when it costs nothing? Is devotion pure when it is rewarded at every turn? And the Lord, whose gaze sees beyond appearances and into the marrow of souls, spoke with calm authority. All that he has is in your power, said the Almighty, his voice like the deep roll of thunder across eternity. Only do not lay a hand on his person. In that single decree, the stage was set for a test that would echo through time. And so began a drama unseen by man, but destined to shake the soul of one righteous man on earth. The angels watched in silence as the accuser withdrew, descending like a storm toward the land of Uz. No trumpet sounded, no omen warned. The day would begin like any other, bright, peaceful, ordinary, until heaven's wager became earth's sorrow. Far below, Job rose with the morning sun, unaware that the eyes of heaven and hell alike had turned toward him. The fields shimmered gold in the distance. The laughter of his children drifted on the wind. Servants moved between house and pasture with baskets of grain, while shepherds whistled from the hills. Life was abundant, simple, good. Job stood for a moment on the threshold of his house, breathing in the scent of soil and dew. He gave thanks, as he always did, for the Lord's goodness. But the peace of that morning was fragile, a stillness before the breaking of worlds. High above, The accuser waited for his moment, his fury cloaked in patience. He would not strike once, but again and again, like waves against a rock, to see if the rock would crack. He watched the man below, the one heaven boasted of, as if studying a fortress for its weakness. And though Job could not see it, a great unseen tension had already stretched across his sky. Soon, a shadow would cross the sun. Soon, the messengers would run with trembling feet. Soon, loss would carve its name into the walls of his heart. But for now, he was still untouched, still righteous, still blessed, still unaware that his name had been spoken in the courts of eternity. And somewhere beyond mortal hearing, the heavens held their breath. For the test of faith is never in comfort, but in loss. The question had been asked. The permission had been given. The day was like any other. The sun rose over Uz, a molten sphere lifting through a veil of amber mist, spilling gold across fields of grain that swayed like seas of light. The world seemed peaceful, held in balance. The kind of morning when even the air feels blessed. And in the quiet turning of the earth, destiny began to move. Servants moved with rhythm, the hum of work mingling with the soft bleating of sheep and the distant ring of metal tools. Job's children, full of joy, feasted together in the house of their eldest brother, their laughter drifting faintly on the wind like a melody from another time. Job himself stood near the courtyard gate, surveying his land with quiet gratitude. Every heartbeat was a prayer, every breath, thanksgiving. The cattle lowed contentedly in the distance. The sky was wide, the earth faithful. Yet somewhere beyond the horizon of human knowing, a shadow moved, a darkness unseen but already approaching. Before the sun could lean westward, the light itself seemed to dim, not in color, but in spirit. Something shifted. The air grew still. Then, faint at first, a sound, footsteps. Urgent, uneven. A lone figure appeared on the road, running as though chased by the wind. Dust rose behind him, blurring his form until he stumbled through the outer gate, breath torn from his lungs. Job turned. The servant's face was pale, streaked with dirt and sweat, his eyes wild with disbelief. "My lord," he gasped, clutching his chest. The oxen were plowing and the donkeys feeding beside them, and the Sabaeans fell upon them. They slaughtered the servants and took the animals away. I alone have escaped to tell you." The words fell heavy, like stones dropping into still water. Job blinked, as if the meaning might dissolve if he refused it. The Sabaeans, raiders, merciless and swift. His men, his beasts, his livelihood, gone in a single blow. He opened his mouth to speak, but before the first servant's cry could fade, another burst into the courtyard, his voice trembling with terror. "Master, the fire of God fell from heaven. It burned up the sheep and the shepherds and consumed them all. I alone escaped to tell you." Job's pulse quickened. The second blow landed harder than the first. Fire from heaven. Not war. Not man. Nature. Or was it judgment? The ground seemed to tilt beneath him. His mind reeled between faith and fear, between disbelief and awe. And then, before he could even gather thought, a third figure appeared at the gate, covered in dust, his robe torn halfway down his side. He fell to his knees before Job, gasping for air. "The Chaldeans, my lord." They formed 3 bands, surrounded the camels, and struck. They took them all and killed the servants with the sword. I alone escaped to tell you. 3 messengers, 3 disasters. In less than an hour, the pillars of his estate had fallen. Wealth, work, and strength, all swept away like sand in a storm. Job staggered. His hands shook. The air felt thin. Yet even then, heaven had not finished speaking. As the third messenger's words faded into the trembling silence, a fourth appeared at the edge of the courtyard, stumbling, broken, blood on his tunic, grief in his eyes. Job turned, dread already forming like a storm in his chest. The man could barely speak. "Your sons and your daughters," his voice cracked, choked by sorrow. They were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. Suddenly, a great wind came from across the wilderness. It struck the four corners of the house. It collapsed, and they are dead. I alone escaped to tell you. The words fell like a blade through the heart of silence. For a long moment, the world ceased to move. Even the wind stopped. The birds quieted. The earth beneath Job's feet felt hollow, as if everything solid in his world had crumbled. His knees weakened. His eyes clouded. The sounds of life around him seemed to fade into nothing. All that he loved, all that he had, was gone. The laughter of his sons, the voices of his daughters, the songs that once rose from the banqueting halls, the footsteps that used to fill his home, every joy, every dream, every echo of family, all buried in a single gust of wind. He did not speak. He could not. The messengers watched, uncertain whether to stand or flee. The air hung heavy with sorrow that could not yet find words. Then, slowly, Job sank to his knees. His trembling hands reached for his robe. He tore it from his chest. The sound of fabric ripping cut through the silence like thunder. Dust rose as he fell forward, his forehead pressing into the ground. He shaved his head with a trembling hand. The ancient gesture of mourning and the dust of his grief filled the air like incense. But he did not curse. He worshipped. With voice breaking under the weight of loss, he whispered, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return there. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." And all of heaven listened, and all of hell trembled. The accuser had struck every visible blessing from Job's life, but the one thing he could not steal was the fire burning unseen, the love that worships even in ruin. But his rage was not satisfied. He rose again before the throne of God, his pride bleeding but unbroken. "Skin for skin," he hissed. "Touch his flesh and bones, and he will curse you to your face." And the Lord, still confident in his servant's faith, answered, "Behold, he is in your hand, but spare his life." Then the accuser descended again, and pain entered Job's body like a flood. Boils rose upon his skin, raw and searing. His breath grew shallow. The pain crawled beneath his flesh, unrelenting, until even the act of sitting became torment. He found no rest in day or night. He sat among ashes, the ancient place of mourning, scraping himself with broken pottery. The once great man of Uz was now the picture of ruin, a heap of humanity and dust. His skin cracked. His lips trembled. His eyes burned red from weeping. And still, he breathed. His wife came to him, her face streaked with tears, her soul exhausted from grief too heavy to bear. She had buried her children, seen her home reduced to silence, her husband disfigured beyond recognition. Her voice trembled, filled with pain that bordered on despair. "Do you still hold fast to your integrity?" she whispered. "Curse God and die." Her words were not cruelty. They were the cry of a heart that could no longer endure. But Job lifted his gaze to her, his voice rough, cracked, but steady. "You speak as one of the foolish women speaks," he said. "Shall we indeed accept good from God, and not accept adversity?" And again, heaven watched. Job's body was broken, his faith bleeding, but still alive. Night fell over Uz, heavy and endless. The stars looked down, silent witnesses to the agony of a righteous man. By the dim flicker of an oil lamp, Job's mind wandered through the ruins of memory. The faces of his children, the echo of their laughter, the pastures once green with life. Now, everything was ash and silence. Days passed. The wounds festered. The pain became a second heartbeat. But even suffering cannot remain unseen forever. Word of Job's calamity spread across the land, and 3 friends came from afar, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. Men of age, men of wisdom, men who once shared counsel in days of prosperity. When they saw him from a distance, they stopped. His figure, gaunt and blistered, barely resembled the man they had known. They lifted their voices and wept, tore their garments. and cast dust upon their heads. Then they sat down beside him on the ground. No one spoke. No one dared. For 7 days and 7 nights they sat in silence, each heartbeat marked by grief too sacred for words. They saw that his pain was very great, and heaven, still watching, waited for what would rise next from the ashes of a man who had lost everything: his words, his lament, his faith, or his breaking. But grief does not stay silent forever. Even the strongest heart has an echo, and Job's silence began to tremble with it. The storm within him, once held at bay by sheer reverence, started to stir, slow, deep, inevitable. The nights were long and heavy, stretched thin across a sky that refused to speak. Sleep, that fragile mercy, abandoned him. Each time he closed his eyes, the faces of his children returned, their laughter fading into cries, their songs turning into whispers that dissolved into the wind. The stars above, once symbols of divine order, now seemed to mock him with their indifference. They shone as they always had, untouched by human suffering, cold and remote, as if creation itself had forgotten his name. He searched for meaning in ashes, for reason in ruin. His fingers sifted through the dust as though answers might lie buried there beside his hope. He looked to the heavens that had once smiled upon him, that had once poured blessing after blessing, and whispered through cracked lips, "Why?" But the heavens did not answer. They remained still, vast, and wordless. There is a kind of pain that does more than wound. It unravels the soul. It strips a man not only of comfort, but of certainty. And Job had entered that sacred silence where faith must walk without sight, where the path is unseen and the voice of God is a whisper lost in the wind. He sat for hours without moving, listening to the hollow rhythm of his own breath. In the dark, he wrestled with the invisible, between the God he trusted and the silence that now surrounded him. The mind of man seeks reasons, the heart of faith seeks presence. But in this place, both seemed distant. The God he loved felt hidden behind the veil of calamity, and Job's questions rose like smoke into a sky that would not respond. Each sunrise brought no relief. The light that used to mean mercy now only revealed the depth of his desolation. His skin burned, his sores festered, his body trembled with weakness. Yet in the unseen realm, his endurance thundered louder than any words could. The adversary had taken his wealth, his children, his health, but not his worship. That small, fragile flame still flickered in the ruins of his soul, defiant against the wind. And it is there, right there, where the true test of faith begins. Not when blessings overflow, not when prayers are answered, but when the ground beneath you collapses and still you whisper, "Blessed be his name." Job's tears fell into the dust, and the dust remembered. It had seen the beginning of man. It had received the breath of God, and now it received the sorrow of his servant. Job leaned against the cold stones of his dwelling, the smell of decay and smoke clinging to the air like a ghost. He was surrounded by reminders of what once was: burned tools, shattered pottery, the empty outlines of beds once filled with laughter. Yet in the midst of despair, something unseen hovered near, a presence not loud, not obvious, but deeply real. It was peace, not the peace that removes pain, but the peace that stands beside it. The kind that does not erase grief, but steadies it. The kind that whispers, "You are seen." The heavens remained silent, yes, but silence does not mean absence. For even in stillness, God was watching, not as a cruel observer, but as a refiner at the fire, shaping gold from dust. The hands that had permitted the test were the same hands that would one day restore. One night, a breeze crossed the ruins. It came softly, carrying the scent of faraway rain. The stars above were clear again, their light spilling across the ashes like a promise half remembered. The moon hung low and full, its silver glow tracing the lines of Job's scarred face. He sat upright, his breath slow, his gaze distant, and for a long while he said nothing. Then, from the depths of his chest, a sound emerged, not quite a sob, not quite a sigh, something between mourning and prayer. "Oh, that my grief were weighed," he murmured, voice breaking, "and my calamity laid in the balances together." His words drifted upward, trembling between accusation and worship. "For the arrows of the Almighty are within me," he continued. "Their poison drinks up my spirit. The terrors of God set themselves in array against me." The words came not as rebellion, but as truth. His pain had found its voice, and in the vast quiet beyond the stars, heaven still listened. For though he could not hear God, God heard every cry. Though he could not feel his hand, his presence still lingered, unseen and unwavering. The silence of heaven is never indifference, it is preparation. But for now, the test was not over. The winds of trial had only begun to shift. Tomorrow, voices would come, voices claiming wisdom, claiming knowledge of God's ways. His friends would speak, and with them, the weight of misunderstanding. They would question his innocence, accuse his motives, dissect his suffering as if pain could be explained. And Job's heart, already shattered, would be laid bare before the world. This was only the beginning of Job's journey. The outer walls of faith had fallen, but the inner sanctuary remained. The place where questions burn and answers hide, where man and God meet in raw, unguarded truth. That sanctuary would soon be shaken by the thunder of lament, by the clash of human reason and divine mystery. And as the camera of heaven pulls back over the ruins of Uzi, over the man who sits in ashes yet refuses to curse his maker, one truth gleams faintly through the smoke. Even in silence, God is never absent. Because faith, real faith, is not proven when prayers are answered, but when they seem to vanish into the wind and the heart still says, "Though he slay me, yet will I trust him." That sentence would one day echo across generations, through deserts and cathedrals, through cries of the broken and the faithful alike. It is the anthem of all who endure what they cannot understand, who love God through tears rather than triumph. This was the test, the first tremor of a storm that would echo through centuries, as the mystery of suffering met the majesty of faith. Job's ashes became a stage for the eternal question: can love endure without reward? Can devotion survive in the dark? And from those ashes, the answer began to form, not in words, but in the silence between them. If you listen closely, you can still hear it, the faint hum of trust beneath the roar of grief, the whisper of worship beneath the collapse of worlds. And so, as the final ember of the night fades and dawn rises once more over the barren land of Uzi, heaven still watches. The story is not done. This was only the beginning. If you think Job's faith has been tested, wait until you hear his cry in the next chapter, the lament of the broken. Subscribe and continue the journey.